Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into a significant online security issue.
Yeah, it's a serious weakness discovered in Craft CMS.
Right, and that powers a lot of websites people use every day.
So our goal here is to really get a handle on this vulnerability.
What it is, what trouble it can cause.
And, what it actually means if you're running a website or looking after one.
We've looked at quite a bit of information, threat reports, vulnerability databases.
Security advisories, technical research on the specific Craft CMS problem.
And this deep dive is brought to you by Stonefly. They're leaders in enterprise storage, backup, and disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
That's right. So if you're looking for secure, ransomware-proof storage, Stonefly has air-gapped and immutable options.
You can contact sales at stonefly.com to schedule a demo. Now, here's the kicker.
Even though patches are out.
Hundreds of sites have already been hit, and thousands, literally thousands, are still sitting ducks.
It's pretty worrying.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where did this all start? How was it found?
Well, the vulnerability itself, it's logged as CVE 2025-32432.
Right.
And it was actually spotted around mid-February this year, 2025,
Okay.
by researchers at Orange Cyber Defense. They found it during a forensic investigation.
Forensics. So they were looking at a server that was already compromised.
Exactly, a server running Craft CMS that had been broken into.
And where in Craft CMS did they pinpoint the problem? What's the weak spot?
It's in a built-in feature, the image transformation tool.
Oh, the thing admins use to resize images and change formats.
Precisely. Helps manage all the visual assets on a site.
So what's the actual issue? How does that tool become a doorway for attackers?
Well, the core problem is that someone without any credentials, like no login needed.
A non-authenticated user.
Right. They can send a specially crafted POST request to the endpoint that handles those image transformations.
Okay.
And the dangerous part is the data in that malicious request gets interpreted by the server while it's setting up the transformation object.
So the server basically gets tricked into processing bad data.
Essentially, yes. That's the heart of the vulnerability.
This sounds serious then, not just a minor bug. How bad are we talking?
Oh, it's bad. CVE 2025-32432 has a CVSS score of 10. A perfect 10.
10 out of 10. Wow. That's maximum severity, right?
Maximum severity. It signifies a critical vulnerability.
What makes it a 10? What can an attacker actually do?
It allows for remote code execution, RCE.
RCE.
Okay.
Okay, that means they can run their own code on the server from anywhere.
Exactly. They can potentially run arbitrary commands on the affected server. Think of it like
Gaining control.
potentially complete control over the website the server it runs on.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the nightmare scenario.
definitely.
And what makes it even worse is the low complexity.
Low complexity, meaning it's easy to pull off.
Relatively speaking, yes. The attack doesn't need special privileges, no admin rights, nothing.
And the website owner doesn't need to click anything or interact.
Yep, no user interaction required. That low barrier makes it incredibly dangerous and, frankly, easier to exploit widely.
Okay, so how does an attack like this actually work? What are the steps involved?
Well, what we're seeing is often a chaining of two vulnerabilities.
Chaining.
Yeah, they use CVE 2025-32432, the Craft CMS one, often in combination with another vulnerability.
Another one. Where?
In the PHP framework. That's the underlying framework Craft CMS is built on.
Okay. So a problem deeper down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That second one is CVE 2024-58136. It shows how issues in fundamental frameworks can bubble up.
Right, cascading effects. So a two-pronged attack. What's the first move an attacker makes?
Often the first step is finding a valid asset ID.
Asset ID. That's like the identifier for an uploaded file or image in Craft.
Precisely. Attackers basically probe the system. They send lots of PS2 requests to a specific URL, index.php.p, admin actions, sassets, generate, transform.
And they just keep trying different ID numbers.
Yeah, they increment the ID with each request. It's like automated key jiggling.
Looking for one that works. How do they know when they've found one?
They look for a specific server response, the 302 status code. If they get that 302 back, it means, aha, this asset ID is valid. That gives them a target for the next stage.
Got it. So they have a valid ID. What's next? How do they leverage the actual Craft vulnerability, CVE 2025-32432?
There seem to be a couple of main methods being used in the wild.
Okay.
Method one is sort of the direct approach, getting code to run immediately.
How?
They send another POST request to that same image transformation endpoint. But this time, the request body is modified.
Modified how?
It contains actual PHP code that the attacker wants the server to run.
Wait, you could just stuff PHP code in a request and the server runs it? How?
It exploits a flaw in how Craft CMS handles the configuration of certain objects internally.
Huh?
It allows the attacker to trick the system into creating arbitrary PHP classes, like ones it wasn't supposed to.
Which classes are they using?
One observed is guzzle HTTP PSR7 FN stream. The clever bit is how they misuse its functionality, specifically its destructor method.
That's destructor, like when the object is being cleaned up?
Exactly. They manipulate it so that when this object is destroyed, it actually executes a function they specified, like fpinfo, just a test, or something more malicious.
Wow, that's sneaky. Using the cleanup process to run code. What's the second method?
The second one is called session injection. It's a bit more roundabout, two-step.
Okay, step right.
First, the attacker sends a GET request, a normal browser request, to an admin page, maybe like the dashboard index.php.p admin dashboard.
But they aren't logged in, right?
Right. And they inject their PHP code into a parameter in the URL, often called A.
Okay, what happens then? They just get sent to the login page.
Usually, yeah. But here's the trick. Craft CMS, when redirecting unauthenticated users, sometimes saves the URL they were trying to reach.
The one with the malicious code in it.
Exactly. It saves that URL in a temporary server file called a PHP session file.
So the code is now just sitting there on the server in a temp file.
Kind of like leaving a poison node in the server's temporary storage, yes.
Okay, the code's planted. How do they trigger it? That's step 2.
Step 2, yeah. The attacker sends another POST request, again to the image transformation endpoint.
Right.
But this time, the request body is crafted to leverage a component from the underlying YE framework, specifically YE-back fmanager.
Okay, how does that help?
They construct the request in a way that tells this YE component to look at the path of that PHP session file.
The one where they stashed the code earlier.
Precisely. This forces the server to basically include and execute the malicious PHP code from that session file.
That is quite sophisticated. A 2-stage attack using session files. Have attackers actually been doing this? Is it happening now?
Oh, absolutely. We saw the first manual exploits of CVE 2025-32432 around February 10th this year.
Annual first.
Then, just a few days later, around Valentine's Day, February 14th, things became automated.
Automated, meaning scripts.
Yeah, strongly suggests attackers develop tools to scan for vulnerable sites and exploit them automatically. Much faster, much wider reach.
And once they're in using these methods, what are they typically doing?
A very common pattern is downloading a web shell, usually a PHP-based file manager.
Like filemanager.php.
That's one name we've seen frequently, yes. Sometimes they try to hide it, renaming it to something less obvious, like autoloadclassmap.php.
A file manager. That gives them pretty free reign over the website's files, doesn't it?
It really does. From there, they can upload more malicious stuff.
Like what?
Other PHP backdoors, scripts to steal data, maybe deface the website, or even try to take it offline completely by messing with critical files.
So how big is this problem? How many sites are we talking about?
Well, as of mid-April, the estimate was around 13,000 Craft CMS instances still vulnerable.
13,000.
Wow. And out of those, nearly 300 were suspected of already being compromised.
How do they know they were compromised?
Based on finding those telltale signs, the exploitation artifacts like those malicious file manager scripts we just talked about.
That's a lot of sites potentially affected. You mentioned the YE framework vulnerability earlier, CVE 2024-58136. Can we circle back to that link?
Sure. Yeah, the Craft CMS issue, CVE 2025-32432, it doesn't exist in isolation. It's partly enabled by this flaw in the underlying YE framework.
The foundation Craft is built on.
Right. It really underscores how dependencies can introduce risk. Even well-established frameworks aren't immune.
What's the specific issue in YE?
It's about how the framework handles attaching extra functionalities, which it calls behaviors, to its components.
Okay.
The specific flaw, CVE 2024-58136, is triggered when these behaviors are defined using a particular array key. Class. Yeah. And interestingly, this was actually a regression.
A regression, meaning it was fixed before.
Exactly. A problem that had been solved previously but somehow crept back into the code. Oops.
Happens sometimes, I guess. How severe is that YE vulnerability on its own?
That one, CVE 2024-58136, has a CVSS score of 9.0 now.
9.0, so
Yeah.
high, but not quite the critical 10 of the Craft one.
Correct. Still very serious, especially for anything built on YE, but not the absolute maximum like the Craft RCE vector.
Did YE release a patch for their issue?
They did, yes. Yi framework version 2.0.52, released on April 9th, 2025, fixes that behavior attachment issue.
And Craft CMS, how do they respond for their users?
Craft acted fast too. They put out their own fixes on April 10th.
The day after the Yi patch.
Right. In Craft versions 3.9.15, 4.1.15, and 5.6.17.
And their fix addresses the problem directly in Craft.
Yes. Crucially, they implemented an application-level fix. It blocks the specific attack vectors we discussed, even if the underlying Yi framework within Craft wasn't immediately updated. It directly protected their users.
That's good. So the patches are available. What's the bottom line for website owners using Craft CMS right now? What do they need to do?
Priority number one, absolutely, is update Craft CMS. Get to one of those patch versions, 3.9.15, 4.14.15, or 5.6.17. That closes the main door.
Okay, update immediately. What if, for some technical reason, someone can't update right this second? Any temporary measures?
Yes, there's a temporary mitigation. You can configure your web server or firewall to block POST requests going to that actions assets generate transform path.
But only if.
Only if the request body contains the specific string class.
So blocking requests with class in the body to that specific endpoint.
Exactly. It can help disrupt some exploitation attempts, but, and this is important, it's just a temporary measure, not a substitute for patching.
Right. A Band-Aid, not a cure. Update is still essential.
Absolutely.
Now, what about the scary scenario? What if someone thinks, uh-oh, maybe my site was already hit? What are the immediate steps then?
Okay. If you suspect a compromise, Craft CMS has clear recommendations. First, refresh your Craft security key.
Oh.
There's a command line tool, PHP Craft Setup Security Key. Run that. Critically, you then need to make sure that new key is deployed everywhere your site runs: development, staging, production.
Refresh the main security key. Got it. What else?
Rotate all private keys and credentials. Think API keys for services like Stripe, Amazon S3, anything sensitive.
Especially if they're stored as environment variables.
Yes. And also change your database username and password as a precaution.
Okay, keys and database creds. What about user accounts?
Definitely force a password reset for all users. You don't know if credentials were leaked.
Is there a command for that too?
There is. PHP Craft reset bassers set password reset required to FN equals true. That flags everyone to reset their password on next login.
So update first. If you can't, temporary block. If compromised, refresh security key, rotate other keys in DB creds, force user password resets, anything else. This is critical.
Yes, one really vital point. Just upgrading Craft CMS does not remove malicious files the attackers might have already uploaded.
The patch doesn't clean up the mess.
Exactly. You must manually inspect your server's file system. Look for suspicious files.
Like those file managers, .filemanager.php.
Right, or autoload class map.php, sometimes wp-22.php, style.php, anything that looks out of place or has a recent unexpected modification date.
So patch, secure, and clean up manually. It's a multi-step process if you've been hit.
It really is. Thoroughness is key.
This sounds like it could be affecting sites anywhere. Is it a global problem?
It is, yeah. Vulnerable Craft instances have been found worldwide. There's a notable concentration in the US, but it's definitely global.
And the attacks have been ongoing since February.
At least since February 2025, yes. It's been a sustained campaign.
It just shows how fast attackers move once a vulnerability like this drops, doesn't it?
It really does. The window between disclosure and active exploitation can be incredibly short. Constant vigilance is just the name of the game now.
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. Key takeaways here. We've got a critical RCE vulnerability in Craft CMS, CVE 2025-32432.
Actively exploited, often chained with a Yi framework flaw, CVE 2024-58136.
Hundreds of sites already compromised, thousands still vulnerable despite patches being available.
So the absolute must-do is update Craft CMS to the secure versions immediately.
And if you even suspect a compromise, follow those remediation steps carefully. Keys, credentials, passwords, and crucially, manual file cleanup.
Don't forget the cleanup.
Definitely. So that leaves us with a final thought for everyone listening. In this landscape where critical flaws are weaponized so quickly,
Yeah, what proactive measures can you or your organization really put in place? Not just for timely patching, because that's hard enough.
right, but also for robust detection. How do you get better at spotting malicious activity on your web platforms before it's too late? Something to think about.
Absolutely. And remember, this deep dive was sponsored by Stonefly. They're experts in enterprise storage, backup, disaster recovery, AI storage, and cloud solutions.
If secure, ransomware-proof storage is on your mind, check out their air-gapped and immutable storage options. You can reach out to sales@stonefly.com to schedule a demo.